Jesus said to the 12, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me. Whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward, and whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. And whoever gives even a cup of cold water to one of these little ones in the name of a disciple, truly I tell you, none of these will lose their reward." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
I invite you to be seated. Okay, great. May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable to you, O Lord, my rock and my redeemer.
Amen.
Amen. Jesus said to the 12, "Whoever welcomes you welcomes me, and whoever welcomes me welcomes the one who sent me." I'm going to say something to you this morning that I rarely say. So listen carefully. Hope Lutheran Church of Troy, New York, is one of the most welcoming congregations I've ever experienced, if not the most. And I have precedents for saying this. Did you hear that? Okay, I just want to make sure you got that. You see, although I was not raised in the Lutheran Church, I have been a member and a participant in the Lutheran Church for over 40 plus years. I know this church, not just theologically and biblically, but culturally. I know church-wide, I know the Synod, and I know congregations, probably better than a lot of folks who were born Lutheran. In that time, I've had the opportunity to serve, to attend, and visit many, many, many Lutheran churches all over the country. From Florida, Pennsylvania, New York, New Jersey, I could keep going on, Minnesota, Missouri, New Mexico, Montana, Colorado, and even Tokyo, Japan. Now, there are probably a great many that I am leaving out, but suffice to say that I've had my fair share of Lutheran churches. And do you know what? Every single one of these churches would describe themselves as a welcoming community. They see themselves as welcoming of one another and of the stranger. They experience themselves as warm and inviting to all, especially new visitors. Unfortunately, in most instances, this was not my experience, nor the experience of those with whom I often visited these churches. The problem was, you see, that these people inside these churches too often confuse niceness with being welcoming. In the majority of cases, the people in these churches were filled with nice people, people you wouldn't mind having dinner with or even perhaps getting to know better. And yes, they were nice, but they were not necessarily welcoming. They thought because they were nice and genuinely caring people that they were welcoming as a congregation. And actually, unfortunately, too often the opposite was true. Too often visitors experience such nice congregations as cold and standoffish. More than once I've heard people complain that they have visited a congregation only to be ignored by the people in the congregation. And it wasn't just during the service, but just as likely to occur during the fellowship hour. Now, just so we're clear, these people are not conscious of the fact that they're ignoring people. Because you see, the fact is they're just not paying attention. People tend to sit with their own groups. Individuals, they are comfortable with their own family. And while this is not bad in and of itself, it can keep congregants from seeing and being present to one another and the stranger sitting in their midst, alone at a table, awkwardly standing sometimes at the coffee urn, hoping someone might take the time to talk to them and welcome them. Because here's the problem. To be welcoming is an intentional activity. It doesn't just happen all by itself or because you are a nice person. You have to be alert to the opportunities to welcome the stranger. And if you are an introvert by nature, then you need to think about conversation starters. Simple things to help you keep your attention on your visitor, not your anxiety at talking to an absolute stranger. See, I always tell people, I am an introvert by nature. Did you know that? Yeah, surprise. I just happen to be a professional extrovert. I've learned to talk to strangers because I don't focus on myself or my anxiety, but my attention is focused on them. And each individual who crosses your threshold requires a different kind of welcome. This is no one size fits all. Take a look at the rest of our gospel message this morning. Jesus says, whoever welcomes a prophet in the name of a prophet will receive a prophet's reward. And whoever welcomes a righteous person in the name of a righteous person will receive the reward of the righteous. So it's not just enough to say a quick hello and think you've welcomed someone. It's a beginning, but just a beginning. So now how would you welcome a prophet? If a prophet of God entered our church today, would you just hand him or her a bulletin and tell them to have a seat? No. You would welcome him or her as a prophet, as one who has a message from God and needs to be listened to. You would welcome the prophet into your midst as one who can guide you back into right relationship with God. So that means you'd be curious. You'd ask questions, not invasive questions, but questions about being a prophet. What is the word that is coming to you that I need to hear? And so too, when a family walks through a door, you, yes, begin by handing them a bulletin and guiding them to their seats. But you make sure they are seated next to one who can help them through the service. Assume they are not Lutheran unless otherwise notified. You let them know where the bathrooms are, especially the family bathroom. And of course, you invite them to fellowship afterwards, and you show an enthusiastic, genuine interest in who they are. Where are they from? How are they settling in? If they have children, their ages. How are the children adjusting to their new home? Are they new to the experience of church? You have to be careful how you say this because you don't want to say it in a judgmental way, but in a way that is helpful and aware. Later, you can extend an invitation to an event we are having here at the church or even in the community that might meet their needs and make them feel more adjusted and welcomed into this new place, because you know the community in a way perhaps that they do not. And trust me, they will appreciate that. Without saying names, I'll just say that, I'm new now to East Greenbush. I discovered that's where I live. I do not live in Troy. And there have been people who are saying, you got to go to this restaurant, you have to go here. I've been listening because I don't know those places. So that's exciting for me. Even though I've been here 7 years, I don't know this side of the river. And so that's a blessing for me. And so you do the same thing with someone who is new, who's here. I love that in Jesus' gospel this morning, he didn't just say welcome everyone as though they were the same, but he made a distinction as to the various types of welcome given to diverse individuals. If you think about it, it's not so dissimilar as to what we do in our own lives. If you welcome your friend into your family who you've known for years and years and you're familiar, they come into the back door, maybe the kitchen. We don't care what it looks like necessarily. But when your in-laws are coming, it's amazing how tidy the place can get. You know, your best friend will come and won't recognize it. The preparations are different in anticipation, right? Do the same thing at work. You're developing a new relationship. They're now becoming a friend beyond work. Your welcoming of them into your home is different than a friend you've known for years. You still want to impress. And think about the group that maybe meets at one another's homes, your quilting group, your knitting group, your book group. Every month, you prepare for the group and welcome them differently into your own homes. Is it any wonder that Jesus tells us to do the same when we welcome into our midst those who step across our thresholds into our churches? Pay attention to each individual or group that enters the doors of your church, says Jesus, and welcome them accordingly. For when you do so, you will receive the reward of those persons. If a righteous person, the one who is a person who has a deep and abiding relationship with God, who brings into your midst the presence of God through their person, a great reward. For those who today cross our threshold, I might say we receive our reward in the joy and the gifts and the energies of those welcomed lovingly and intentionally for who they are into our midst. Now, I want to be sure to say, because they may be listening, to my more recent experiences, particularly my previous two congregations, Our Redeemer in Scotia, Good Shepherd in Loudonville, have been very positive. And I would categorize both as welcoming congregations. I would have no problem inviting others, telling them about each of those church communities. But Hope Lutheran, you excel in this area. Amen. You are genuinely warm and a welcoming congregation. And their incredible intentionality on your part. Suffice to say, I am in awe sometimes of this about you. It is a rare quality. You as a congregation have been intentional about welcoming the stranger into your midst. And I think it has made all the difference. But having said this, and you knew there was going to be a caveat, right? Yeah. You have to remain vigilant in this area. In other words, you can never take such intentionality for granted. It's too easy to become a congregation filled with nice people and think that's welcoming, to lose your edge. Now, that's not saying you shouldn't be nice. Nice is good. But being welcoming goes to a different level altogether. Most people fail to realize it, but the art of genuinely welcoming the stranger is part of the evangelism process that Jesus calls us to as his disciples. When we welcome another, we see them clearly. We give them the gift of our presence and the gift of their being fully seen by us. And it goes both ways. Welcoming the stranger allows the door to open to the gift of the other's presence and of our being seen. Right now, we live in a time where we are not seeing one another fully, clearly. We have lost the art of welcoming the other into our midst. I don't just mean the stranger, but those who think differently, hold different political and social positions. We do not welcome them into our orbit, and thus we refuse to see them, and they do not see us. We do not listen, and thus we are not present to them, and they are not present to us. You know, I love the book of Acts. It's my favorite book. And what I find fascinating about the books of Acts is how diverse the opinions and thoughts were amongst these first followers of Christ, how hard it was in the midst of conflict. And if you read the book of Acts, the the book about what happens after Jesus ascends and the church struggles to exist in a hostile and politically divided country, you begin to see that they did not think or experience the risen Christ in the same way. Paul argues with Peter, and Peter argues with Jerusalem leaders, and so on. You know, and I had not paid attention, and well, I did because I read through it, but I was looking at this morning, sitting up there, and I was like, oh, Peter and Paul, apostles. You want to turn to that first page in your bulletin? If you haven't read it, I'm going to read it to you because it's worth reading. These two are an odd couple of biblical witnesses to be brought together in one commemoration. It appears that Peter would have gladly served as the editor of Paul's letters. In a letter attributed to him, Peter says that some things in Paul's letters are hard to understand. Peter was nice. Paul's criticism of Peter is more blunt. In Galatians, he points out ways that Peter was wrong. One of the things that unites Peter and Paul is the tradition that says they were martyred together on this date in 67 or 68. But what unites them more closely is their common confession of Jesus Christ. Together, Peter and Paul lay a foundation and build the framework for our lives of faith through their proclamation of Jesus Christ. Two major giants, and they did not agree. And they probably were nice in what they put in the things that we're reading. It may not have been that nice. They focus on the risen Christ and how that allowed to see Christ in one another. To keep listening, even when it was uncomfortable, even when it threatened their sense of security and control. Welcoming, as Jesus speaks of it in our gospel this morning, is not just some namsy-pamsy way of greeting one another. It's much more than that. It is a way of inviting Christ into our midst and into our relationships with one another. As we move towards the celebration of our country this 4th of July, celebrating our 250th anniversary, my prayer is that we remember who we were meant to be as a nation, that we reclaim the ideas of freedom, liberty, and justice for all, that we return to being a beacon of hope for the world when the world feels hopeless, that we fight for human rights both at home and around the world, that we remember that our foundation was steeped in the fact that we always welcomed the immigrant, the homeless, the refugees, the ones without hope. We welcomed them, and in the welcoming of them, we saw the gifts that they brought with them. And here's the thing that's just as important. And they saw us and the gift we are to the world as a country. I pray that we turn from the poison of fear and isolation that seems to be threading its way throughout our nation, and turn once again to being a welcoming nation, both inside our borders and outside our borders. Because this is who Christ calls us to be. This is the task of the church. This is what we have to offer, these words. And those of us who follow Christ must never forget this. So happy 4th of July. Amen. 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 Amen.